yeah, title of the talk is test your UI and do it now.
Ding.
So why test a tool? Well, it's all about shared confidence, and it's confidence in releases and confidence in what you've got in production. It's shared in that your whole team can access the things that you are testing, and importantly, they can understand them very quickly as well. So why test your UI? Well, simply just to get closer to your user. Manual testing and automated UI testing, it leads, well, and unit testing leads to more focused manual testing, and that equals less frustrated customers. You can spot problems throughout your user journey before they hit production, especially if you're testing a web interface, as CSS is global. So you can change one thing and then something right across the other side of your application can break. And there are kind of obviously ways to scope your CSS, and there's all sorts of modular things these days, but CSS in my experience is usually bundled and deployed globally so that you can kind of cache it and yeah, can lead to problems. So it's good to kind of have journeys tested throughout your application.
Swish.
So why do it now? Because Arnie said so. Because you can, and I'll show you how in a bit. And also to distract you from writing unit tests for absolutely everything. So add unit tests based on RUKU, so risk, user usage, and code usage. So risk in terms of around like if money's involved, adding unit tests for say small components or functions that will potentially lead to kind of loss of revenue, and also test things around
we're not seeing your screen.
Ah, crap. Thank you. Right. I'll share the slides afterwards. Thanks for letting me know. Can you see that now?
Yeah, great.
Cool. So yeah, test things around where the UX will significantly break if you didn't have them, and things are changing on releases, and yeah, test things around user usage. So speak to your users and use analytics to kind of see paths where your users are actually going. There's no point in testing something thoroughly when they're not even going to that part of your site or application. And also code usage, so how often that function is getting called, which you can kind of gauge with different tools. Istanbul, if you're to kind of bootstrap from the top of your application and run Istanbul against that, you can actually see how many times things are getting called. And also frequently, test frequently used helper methods, so things that you kind of know that are being hit quite a lot. It might not be that they're hit directly, but they might be called by something that it is. So that's why it's good to use tools. So keep things supple as well. So the less kind of unit tests you've got, although it might be quite contentious, this is obviously kind of opinion based. It allows you to refactor code quicker and cheaper. So yeah, make refactoring code cheap again, or Merca. So yeah, test your UI. Let's do it now. So the tools I use, as I'm sure many of you are, I'm on a Mac, and I use VS Code for for my editor, and iterm for my terminal. So basically, I'm going to test the Oliver Bernard website. Go to their contact form, for example. I'm just going to test filling out this form. We could start from say the home page and navigate here, but I'll just keep things simple for now. Maybe expand on it depending on how time goes. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to use Courgette for testing the UI, which is a BDD-based framework. Allows you to write just Gherkin syntax in order to test your UI without having to write any code at all. It's in NPM, so it's JavaScript based, but you don't actually have to write any JavaScript. But if you want to kind of add new bespoke functionality or anything, which is quite easy, then you can write some JS, which I'll show you in a bit when I walk around the project. So first off, I'm going to go to the Courgette website, so courgettetesting.com, and go to the Getting Started page. So it's a Selenium-based tool and kind of installs everything that you need to get going. So you don't need to kind of worry about really installing much other than just kind of running the scripts that are here. So yeah, I'm going to start off. If we go to further tips, just allows us to kind of bootstrap this a lot quicker. I'm just going to kind of create a Git repository. So I'll just copy that. Oops, I'll just talk through what this is doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a folder, and let's just call this site, something like that. It'll cd into the folder, it'll initialize a package JSON, and initialize Git in the repository and create a git ignore file with just no modules and UI test results, which is what gets kind of spat out when you do your test runs. So you don't want to commit those. And then we're just going to create an initial commit. So now we're going to install Courgette. So what this script's going to do is going to install Courgette. It's going to install Chrome driver for us. It's going to install a sample configuration file just to get you started. And I'll walk through that. And it's going to install some sample tests to kind of get you started. I'm going to use the folder structure, but I'm going to create some stuff from scratch and just show how easy it is to use. And then I'm going to install the package scripts, so that I'll just add them to my package JSON, so that if in future I want to run Courgette or I want to install Chrome driver, then I've got everything there to hand. I also have to post install script so that when anyone installs just does npm install, then it's going to add those all the kind of Chrome driver and everything you need, basically. So everyone's kind of set to get going. You can also optionally add the snippets to your IDEs. This will add them to your user folders in VS Code, Sublime, JetBrains, IDEs, and a bunch of others as well. So let's run this. Right, so we've got everything installed. And let's just have a walk around the project of what's been kind of scaffolded out so far. So I'm just going to fire up VS Code. So we've got a configuration file. I hope the font size is good for everybody. The main thing we're concerned with initially is just our base URL. So that's just basically the protocol and the domain name. So let's just grab that. And these are kind of things which a lot of this stuff you don't need to worry about for now, but just have a kind of peruse through here. You can use Firefox driver or Chrome driver. By default, we're going to be using Chrome. So that will just default if you haven't got your environment variables set. There's a few environment variables which you can use to kind of configure things, but I'm not going to kind of go into too much detail. So Courgette is essentially Cucumber.js, protractor. There's also a WDIO branch as well, so you can use WDIO, but it's got also a bunch of functionality which is kind of ready to go, as I say. So you can just write the Gherkin syntax, and then you can abstract the Gherkin syntax to write a lot more succinct BDE, like proper user stories that really kind of are readable to everyone in the team. So the first thing we're going to do is create a page object for the contact page. So this is what a page object looks like in Courgette. It's just a YAML file, and you've just got path, selectors, XPaths, and components. So again, you can use the JS version of this, but this is what the JS version looks like, and the kind of config version just looks, it's just a lot neater. We don't need any components. Components are just to allow you to have selectors that you have on multiple pages, like navigation and things like that. So we're just going to get rid of those for now. And we're just going to map out all the things that we're going to interact with on this page. So first things first is the name. What have we got? We've got an ID, so we can use the ID for this. I recommend kind of, if you're in control of your application and you're kind of doing gray box testing, so you kind of can change little things in your application, then I recommend adding like data attributes that are specific to, it's kind of a separation of concerns, but they're specifically for your UI testing. And then people kind of tend to steer away from them if they're doing, refactors and things like that, and we'll leave them in place. Whereas if you were to use the classes, then, people just assume that's to do with styling. And, if you've got someone just working on the styles, then they might break your tests unnecessarily. If you're using an ID, so these are just CSS selectors, because in YAML comments are done with a hash, you need to put IDs in quotes. So this is our main field. We've got email field. So on and so forth. And message. Yeah, just message. And then lastly, we've just got the button, which we can click. So we can just use the submit field. Best thing to do is kind of test your selectors in here. So you can use the $$ function in the Chrome developer tools, and just check that you're selecting the thing that you expect you're selecting. If you're using XPaths, which are more powerful, they're a bit uglier than using CSS selectors. I think most of you, if you're on this, you should kind of know how to do CSS selectors, but XPaths give you a bit more power, allows you to kind of go up the DOM tree and traverse across. And you can go yeah, ancestors and siblings and what have you. So you can use $X to basically create some more kind of, yeah, more powerful selectors. So anyway, if we grab that, you can see that we've just got one item there, and when we hover over it, it's the thing we're expecting. It's the button that we want to click, so it's the button inside that. So we take this CSS selector, and then we've got our submit. We don't need the quotes for that because there's no ID in there. And this is the contact page. So now we go to our feature file. Again, we're not using components and step definitions, so you can create reusable steps, and you can kind of organize them how you like. I'll go into that in a minute. So we've got our feature. Feature file looks like this. So you've got a feature, and then you've got a number of scenarios for that feature. So our feature is contact form dot feature, and we'll just call this contact. We'll call this contact. We start off doing kind of like a sad path. So you've got happy paths that are kind of everything's good, everything's great, and then we'll do some kind of negative testing that kind of you know, it's showing that the validation works, for example. So the scenario is feature is your contact form. These are tags, so these allow you to run just like all the scenarios in this feature, or just this one scenario when you're actually running the test, to save having to kind of you know, run your whole suite, and you just want to run the one. So just going to get rid of these. Now this is the snippets part. So if you've installed the snippets with this code, then it allows you to kind of really quickly get to the step definitions that you want to use. So these are the step definitions that have been written for you, and this is where the kind of power of Courgette comes. So if we go to steps, it also works on native mobile. So if you're using React Native, you can use it for that. But yeah, you've got a number of step definitions here that you can copy and paste, but if you've got the snippets installed, then you can just write them. You obviously need to know them. You need to kind of have a look what's available and what kind of everything is doing. There's only a couple of special ones really. So given I'm on the page with URL is a special one in that it goes to the page and it also sets the page objects that the kind of locators are referring to. The other special one is then I expect to be on the something page. So we're going to use this one, but I'm just going to write it using the snippets. So you just do given on page, and then we can tab straight to this and get contact. And there's a little bit of magic involved here in that this is pointing to the page file that we've created, which I've closed. Oh, I didn't rename it. So we'll rename this to contact page. And then that's how this is going to be referred to. So in our feature file, now use the locators that I've added there. So when page, sorry, when, what is it we're testing here? So when set, so we want to set the name field to Alex. And then we'll just run this for now and kind of see what it looks like. So if I run npm run, or just npx ct for Courgette, then I can just run this one tag. So let's just run the invalid one for now. So you can see there. Okay, so Chrome driver is just updated. I thought this might happen. So basically, Chrome driver and Chrome need to kind of be in sync with their versions. And it's the case that we are running version 83. So I just need to update my Chrome. Yeah, it's been there's a major version that's just come out of Chrome, which has some security stuff in it. Fingers crossed it still kind of works. Okie doke. Let's try again. And we're good. So what we can do is if we fancy, if we want to kind of see these live being spun up, by default they'll run headlessly, so they're going to run faster. But if you so wish to spin up the browser, it's good for debugging certain things. You can put in waits of like a few hundred seconds and then actually kind of inspect at the point where you're waiting, which is quite handy. The test kind of runs really fast, so it's actually kind of going straight through. So if I do a wait, so I do wait, or say 50 seconds or something. And you can see there that we are able to fill in the form. And we can also take screenshots at certain points. Now, this is really beneficial because you can name the screenshots and then maybe run some diffing from your feature branch against your master branch. And then there's loads of tools out there like Diffie and things like that, where you can kind of really get some good confidence in that, you know, you might not necessarily have kind of text assertions and things like that of what you're expecting. But if you have the images of what you're expecting, then any little bit that changes, you can then basically kind of sign it off and say, yeah, that's what I expect to be changing. So it's super powerful. That's not actually in Courgette. That's something I'm going to look at in the future. It's kind of potentially building that in. But for now, it's really handy just to have a set of screenshots. So if I do then screenshot called, so then take a screenshot called fill contact form or something like that. So now we're going to submit the form and see it fail. So it also spits out the path for you. And if you're using iTerm, it's really handy because you can hold Command and click it and kind of open it in either preview or VS Code or whatever. And we can see here that there's kind of a fade in on the page. So there's some CSS animation going on. We have a step definition for that given the animations are disabled. This is obviously going to make your tasks go faster as well, because it's not waiting for certain transitions to happen. So we can use the and keyword for this, which is part of the Gherkin specification. So and animations are disabled. If we do this, run it again, then have a look at the screenshot, and we can see that it's kind of what we'd expect. So now let's submit the form. So we're going to click the submit button. Just going to comment that screenshot for now. Just focus on the things we're doing. So when click the submit button, again we can do click the submit button. So yeah, let's take a screenshot that it's failed. So so we can see that the element's not clickable at this point. I'm going to be adding a scrolling step definition so that it will scroll to the element. I'm guessing it was off the page. So what we can do for now, just as a kind of a hack around, is we can expand I think there's a step definition for setting the page dimensions. Maybe if we're running it headlessly, it should work. Yeah, and then we've got our screenshot of the whole page, and you can see here that we've got some, fields complaining. It's not complaining about the subject, so I'm guessing that's not a required field. So that's kind of one scenario, in that we've kind of captured that we've got these fields. This field is required, and we can do a kind of global page check, so just to be lazy. So we've got three lots of step definitions. We've got ones that don't require the page objects to work. So this is the top 3 sets, and then step definitions that require the page objects to work. And we're just going to do one which just kind of checks the text on the page. So then I expect the page to contain string. So then expect the page to contain, and it was this field is required. Obviously we can get the locator, use the CSS selector for the actual the text in the field, but just for brevity, let's just do again, this field is required. Cool. And just to make sure that we're not getting false positives, I'm just going to mash the keys, and we'll see that it should hang for however long you've set your timeout to in the configuration file. So by default, it's 10 seconds. And you see here the element you're looking for could not be found within 10-second timeout. It's always good to kind of make the thing fail first, just to double check that you're not getting false positives. So that's the invalid scenario. And then we've got the valid scenario. Here's where you put the scenario name. So contact form shows validation if required fields. field. And this scenario will be kind of like path fields filled. So if we just get rid of this for now, and let's going to split this in two so that we've got our page object on the right and our feature on the left. So we've got the email field, subject field, message field, submit button. So available for hire. Jack. Available for hire soon. And yeah, we can take a screenshot as well. And then screenshot called then click the submit button. And then if we create the submission, the kind of the subsequent page, we can create a page object for that, and it'll assert against the page the path. You can use glob patterns for the paths as well for the assertions. So if we just do for now, just clicking the submit button and see where we are. So let's do the valid one. Okay, yeah, I've just added another quote there. We can use Shift Alt square bracket just for one of those. We could use double quotes or whatever, which wouldn't really make sense for an apostrophe actually. So there we go. You also get an image viewer with this, so you can kind of open this up in a browser, and it's kind of a gallery for all your screenshots, so you can zip through them and just check that you're happy with what you see before a kind of release goes out. So you can test. Obviously, I'm testing against a live site here. You can see it's running pretty fast. I mean, the broadband here is pretty good, but like obviously to get even better speed, you're better off running against your local environment, say the dev server even that you kind of use for creating your apps, and you can then back them up with some mocks so that they're not kind of doing anything too crazy on the back end. If you've got kind of some heavy logic, just to kind of speed up your tests. But the test in Courgette, that's a static React site. There's a static React site inside the Courgette project, which the step definitions are tested against on the CI, on the GitHub Actions. And those tests is about 100 or so tests, and they run in about less than 15 seconds. So it kind of shows you that you can really create quite a lot of assertions with this quite powerful set of tools, which I can't entirely take credit for, because we have Chrome driver, which is an incredible project. We have Cucumber.js, which is really good. Protractor as well. And if there's issues with Protractor, you can always kind of switch that out for WDIO. So I think that kind of covers it. So yeah, let's have a look at our screenshot. And did we click the submit button? I've taken the screenshot after. Maybe I'll just do this one more time, otherwise I'm going to be spamming your inbox. Just so you can get the gist. Let's do a wait. Then wait. Just on the invalid one. And we're also going to spin this up in the browser. So disable headless. You can also put the Courgette headless equals false if you want something a bit more kind of precise, but I like to type as less characters as possible. So again, the element's not clickable. I'm just going to I need a scroll step definition to actually complete this. So I'll do that later. Usually I'm actually working on a bigger monitor so I don't kind of experience this. If we just take a screenshot for now, after the fact, if we just wait 5 seconds, you shouldn't add explicit waits necessarily in the final code. You actually want to assert on the following page, and also if you've got asynchronous stuff loading, you want to make sure that the page is completely loaded. So you'll be checking that certain things are on the page by asserting on the kind of that the element exists or is visible, just as you would as a manual tester, because you're gonna you know, all these things that you're kind of doing as a manual tester, you're checking that this is there, that's there, those sorts of things. It's the same sort of thing. You're not going to click a button until it appears. So those sorts of things. So what we can do is then we can refactor this out into a steps file. So for example, these fields here, I can move into a reusable steps file. This is something that the Cucumber team are quite kind of intrigued by, the fact that a lot of projects historically, there was, I think it was just called Cucumber Steps, which was a Ruby project years ago, and it kind of rubbed ASLAC up the wrong way, because it's kind of like you're creating loads and loads of steps, and you're kind of losing the value of the Gherkin syntax, which is to kind of communicate between, you know, your product and your testers. You don't want reams and reams of Gherkin syntax. So this is kind of quite a nice thing, in that you can abstract this away literally by cutting and pasting it and creating new step definitions with the same syntax. So we're going to just call this step, I fill in the form, fill in the fields correctly or something like that. And all the given, when, thens and ands, they're all interchangeable. They're all basically running the same code behind. So if you just do when I fill in the fields correctly, for now we'll just I won't click the button, because I'm just going to be spamming Vernon's inbox, and we'll just wait there. Actually, I'm not going to be spamming the inbox because it's not clicking it, because it's too far down the page. So you can see here that that still works, even though I've kind of moved that out to a kind of abstracted step. You can also use template injection for this. So if I want to use this slightly different, you know, for want to test with different emails, I can create a variable here and call this like email, and then with email. And then here, I can do hello world.com. Oh, it's because I've put quotes around it. But we can put quotes around it. It kind of shows you where the placeholders are. It's quite nice. It still makes it readable. So there we go. Hello and world.com at well.com. So I think I haven't really prepped too much for this talk, as you can probably tell. So yeah, there's a lot more information on the website. I probably have missed some quite critical functionality, which would be super helpful. The components, again, they're just a way of kind of composing your selectors and your XPaths so that you're just drying your your tests up a bit. And I think that's it. So I guess we'll just go over to questions now, if anybody has any.
Alex, it's Jack. I think there's a few questions in the chat box if you can see them.
I'm not actually familiar with Zoom at all. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I see. So yeah, you can rewatch the live stream again. I might just zip through the presentation really quickly again because it's quite a small presentation. So yeah, test your UI and do it now because you can. It's like it's so quick to get started with this. You can just have a play around with it. You know, once you kind of get to know the step definitions, you can literally test a couple of pages and, you know, in a matter of minutes and get some real value out of it. You can run things kind of in the, on a pre-commit hook, for example, so that you're just checking that, you know, it's all running well before you're committing or before you're pushing or whatever, and kind of, you know, write tests for features as you're creating those features. So yeah, again, it's all about shared confidence, confidence in releases and what's in production. It's shared in that your whole team has access to things you're testing. So you're going to be committing these feature files and you can share those, you know, from GitLab or GitHub or whatever you're using. And they can quickly understand what the thing is that's under test. So, you know, if your tester's away on holiday or your developer is and they're writing the tests, then, you know, you can still kind of run through their kind of test script, so to speak, and still be confident in releasing. So why test your UI? Simply to get closer to your user. And I think this is where I started the live stream. So yeah, I'll go over to the questions now. So what tool is it? So it's Courgette is the tool. That's for Victor. Oh yeah, you've already answered that. So Sean Stone says, out of interest, where do you draw the line on how granular you test UI? We've had issues where our Cucumber suites were taking 1.5 hours with an old monolith because it literally tested everything, but was slowing down releases a lot. Yeah, so really, when you've got things taking 1.5 hours, that's when something's seriously wrong. So we have a place I'm consulting at the moment. We have like literally hundreds of tests, and they take around 15 minutes tops. obviously, you know, that is a bit of time, but it's totally worth the kind of trade-off, because you're getting this confidence that there's absolutely no way that anyone can test all the paths that we've done every single, you know, couple of days when we're releasing, because it's simply not possible. How granular the tests go, as I say, like if you were to add in a tool like Diffie or something like that, you're going to get a lot, you know, more for your money, basically, because you are not specifically saying this is how it should be and this is how that should be. You are taking a snapshot, a screenshot of what it should be like in that state, and then you can kind of test that against your main branch. So obviously that's something you need to write, and there's services out there where they've kind of built it for you, you know, software as a service stuff. So you know, you don't have to write that from scratch, so to speak. I can't remember if there's a talk I saw recently where they kind of done that, but yeah. So I wouldn't go necessarily too granular, but the test steps are really quick once your page is loaded. So really, it comes down to your infrastructure. You want to make sure if you are hitting the back end that you're getting really fast response times, because you know, the more tests you're generating with slow response times, that's all going to add up for sure, and then you're going to end up with 1.5 hours. The place I'm at the moment, as I say, those tests are taking less than 15 minutes. The back end is pretty good. We're not using mocks. We're using like a real test instance. So it is kind of like a specific front end and a specific back end, which is spun up specifically for UI tests, which runs on every single pull request. So there's massive value in that. Obviously, you know, it comes with the cost of the setup, but yeah, it's worth throwing some kind of some time into that, I think. So how do you make your tests? How do you make time for tests in an agile, deadline-driven environment, especially when UIs have very complicated flows? So this all comes down to kind of making sure that you've got like snippets and kind of things to create shortcuts. So there's certain paths that do require quite a lot of steps in order to get into the state that you want to get into. And in some instances, we just create a step definition. If I just bring up, for example, the JavaScript step definitions. So in here, it might be like I set up some state. So I basically, I don't know, publish some page onto my WordPress site that has all these fields. Now, obviously, you know, rather than clicking through the WordPress UI, you would just, you know, fire an API call. So from inside here, you can just do an async call here, and then await, fetch, and you know, just call an endpoint with your body response that creates that page for you. And it might be that you need authorization, or, you know, authentication rather, to kind of make that endpoint. But again, that's just one, you know, fetch call that you await beforehand. So, you know, if you've got password and credentials, things like that, you can save them on your in secrets or something, depending on what stack you're using. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend sticking them in your Git repository, obviously. So yeah, in terms of making time for them, once you get going with this and you kind of get to know what steps there are, you can write these tests really fast. I've done a number of tickets today at work, and you know, have been able to write the tests whilst I've been writing the code. And granted, I know I built this, but it's again, it's one of those things of just knowing what, you know, things you have in your kind of toolkit, and you know, when you can use them. Why would you choose Courgette versus Cypress or Test Cafe? So Courgette is based on open source. You can basically change the code. You haven't got a huge black box. There's really not that much to it. It's just a collection of very supported tools. Cypress and Test Cafe, they're proxy injection software, so that they test in just specific browsers. So I believe they're quite limited in what you can test. They're just on desktop as well, so they're not going to work on mobile applications. Cypress has a nice UI, for example, that you can kind of do stuff with. Courgette is kind of has a Chrome extension, which I'm going to be working on shortly, so that you can kind of click around, but you're going to lose the value of handcrafting your tests, which allow you to kind of make them really reusable. At the end of the day, it's about kind of bootstrapping and get going as soon as possible, and also writing tests that really scale. So the main motive for making Courgette is just from seeing lots of different companies using the tools that Courgette has brought together, and seeing them just write so much stuff to the point where it's just unmanageable. So it provides kind of like a framework of how to kind of craft your tests, so to speak. So you've got the YAML, so it's kind of being very opinionated as how to kind of write things. So Cypress and Test Cafe, I believe, you know, you can write JavaScript and what have you. They execute inside the browser. You've got some fancy UI tools and stuff like that, but as I say, it's a different kind of kettle of fish, and doesn't really kind of allow you to then, you know, transfer that knowledge to, say, native mobile stuff if you end up working on that. But Courgette's based on free open source technology, so it's free forever. Whereas Cypress, I believe they have a pay thing. I think it's free initially, and then when you kind of ramp up, then they start charging or whatever. Spode says, considering you want to run these tests frequently in your example, how would you appropriately test without sending an actual email? So again, this comes down to either testing on your kind of dev environment that's just going to, you know, just no reply, or just some other email address or whatever. Rather than testing in production. I wouldn't necessarily recommend testing in production, but yeah, you could even have some header that you send, or some flag or something that you, if you did want to just test in production to kind of reduce your infrastructure overhead, you can have just something in the code which basically, you know, when you put a query parameter in there or something that, you know, it doesn't actually send the email. Just an idea, for example. So I've seen situations where contact forms show the thank you, etc., but actually the API calls failed and just weren't handled. Not that your UI would code that way. Can you in any way hook in to be certain it was actually sent? I haven't actually done this, so I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah, it's a good question. If you want to do some kind of integration testing, there's a tool that's very similar to this called Headless Li, which I'm going to be kind of harnessing and bringing that into the kind of suite, which tests the APIs in a similar sort of fashion, where you're writing Gherkin syntax and it's actually kind of calling endpoints for you and asserting them. So can you cross-browser test with Courgette? Yeah, it's based on Selenium WebDriver. So yeah, you can test with. So out of the box, you get Chrome driver and Firefox driver, they're going to work on Mac, on certain distributions of Linux. The Firefox one's a bit of a sticky point, but yeah, if you spin up a Windows environment, then you can obviously test using the Windows one as well, just using exactly the same tests. And can you use WDIO on Courgette? Yeah, I covered this earlier. So there is a branch which is pretty much complete, which is basically all the step definitions that you get for free, with them kind of adapted to use the WDIO API. So you can, from the get-go, you can now obviously just create your own step definitions, which is essentially just you using Cucumber, but with Courgette's runner. So Courgette is just basically allowing you to kind of run these tests and get going as soon as possible, and also giving you a bunch of stuff for free, of all the kind of common things that you would actually write, and also the steps to then abstract. So yeah, the WDIO branch is pretty much ready. So I will be releasing that soon. You know, if you have a bunch of tests in WDIO and you don't want to add, you know, yet another tool to your project, then yeah, you could use that for sure. I think that concludes everyone's questions. So I'll hand back to you. Thanks very much for having me, guys.
Thanks for that, Alex. Do you mind stop screen sharing? Is that okay?
Yep.
Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that, mate. Thanks for everyone joining as well. It's good to have everyone on the call. We're always looking for speakers, so if anyone's interested, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, apart from that, I'll be posting a link out tomorrow for the talk, so anyone that's missed it or would like to watch it again can catch up. But apart from that, have a good evening, everyone. And thanks for joining. Cheers for that, Alex. Thanks, mate.